Tonight's subject, to be honest with you, I approached with hesitation. Is this a just world? Is social justice a fantasy? Is it something that everyone should be concerned with? Just think about your life. You're coming of age in your prime during a time of great turmoil, environmentally, politically, socially, and now speaking in terms of your own health. Let me give you some background. I don't know how old most of you were in 2008 during the global financial crisis, but sociologists have said that the generation coming of age at that time in 2008 faced markedly reduced opportunities financially. In other words, they probably would not reach the same level of attainment, material attainment, as their own parents. Many of you have heard this, that for the first time in eons, the American dream is not being passed on. The tradition has been that each successive generation becomes more successful than the preceding one. So it could almost be guaranteed that if you played the game right, pursued your studies properly, had good connections, worked hard, it was almost assured that you would have more material wealth than your parents. But as many of you know, in this day and age of massive college debts, a time when a third of all college graduates will have to take a job that doesn't even require a college degree. A time when even more than a third of college graduates have to get work in a field that they never studied. So it's a time of diminishing expectations, and I always wonder, how does that feel? I like to put myself in others' places. So that was 2008, and the predictions have been verified that those who hit their stride around 2008 and a few years after, prime time, you're in your 20s and early 30s, you're ready to roar. But thanks to the GFC, opportunities shrank. All right. There was a so-called historic economic rebound for some. And then we hit 2020. A market contrast, BC, before COVID-19, and AC, after COVID-19. And of course, we haven't seen after yet. So your generation is actually, if we want to be truthful, your generation is getting a double hit. You may have been young in 2008, but you're feeling the consequences in terms of your statistical possibilities. And now this, 2020. So your question can be, how much should you really be concerned with the well-being of others? I mean, shouldn't you focus on number one? Shouldn't you be looking out for number one? And if you're really going to be a bit charitable and philanthropic, all right, you look out for number two, whoever your significant other is at the present time. But concern for others in mass, is that really necessary to be a good human being? I often tell the story how in Auckland, New Zealand, a very diverse city like San Francisco before all the rents went up, I met a man, and I happened to strike up a conversation with him. He saw I was a monk, so he wanted to defend himself with, I guess you call it, the New Zealand version of the Californian, I'm good, I'm good. He told me, look, I know I'm all right because, number one, I don't molest children. Number two, I don't park in parking spaces designated for the handicapped. I'm fine. That was the standard. So that was a very insightful remark to me. I mean, he's saying, look, as long as you're not causing others pain as much as possible, because after all, it is this world and you have to step on someone's toes sometime. But he says, as long as you're not going out of your way to do that, then basically life is fine. But I know that so many of you can't be satisfied with that kind of life. Although there's so much pressure on you, focus on your senses, focus on your entertainment, focus on your diversions, your indulgences. I can tell you a story during my years at Yale. It was a time when every student, practically speaking, was socially active. There was the Vietnam War going on. Women's rights really took off during that time. The first environmental movements were formed then. So every student, practically speaking, was involved in some kind of social justice activity, protesting something. The only ones who weren't like that were considered freaks. And at that time, amongst university students at the elitist schools, most students were studying the humanities, believe it or not. It sounds shocking now, doesn't it? Most students were trying to study something that they hoped would help themselves and others to make the world a better place. Believe it or not, there were very few business administration students, very few engineering students, and there practically was no IT to speak of. So if there were a few persons like that studying that kind of curriculum, they were considered real oddballs. Nerds. Why aren't you concerned with your purpose in life? Why aren't you concerned with the purpose of society? Social scientists have calculated that at that time, when I was in my university days, 70% of the students had as their number one concern, what is my meaning? What is my purpose? And only 30% had as their number one meaning, how am I going to make money and more money? So that was way back in the early 70s. Now those same polls, those same surveys have reversed. 70% of the students say their number one priority is making the money, and only 30% say the number one priority is finding purpose and meaning in life. But the fact is that we're human beings. We actually can't live without meaning. We can't live without satisfaction, freedom, identity, hope, and we can't live without justice. So how much should a bhakti yogi, someone who has yoga wisdom, be concerned with the justice problems of the world? How much is Bhagavad Gita, the prime bhakti yoga text, concerned with the well-being of others? Many of you know that Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita that someone who's actually a real intellectual sees the true equality of all living entities, no matter what kind of body they have. That doesn't mean the bodies, as you know, are equal. Bodies vary. Some are stronger, some are smarter, some are more beautiful. But that's just the outer wrapping. What about the non-material self, which Krishna explains wears the body, just like we're wearing clothes? Just turning up the microphone here. Krishna also explains that someone who is a perfect yogi sees the true equality of all beings, no matter their packaging of happiness and distress. So here's the point. If we want to understand true justice, we have to understand the external variations in the packaging of a human being, and why not other living entities too? That external packaging, known as the body, will vary in terms of strength, beauty, intelligence, health. But that's not the only packaging, the only external packaging that will vary. Also, the yoga texts explain that different bodies bring or are packaged with differing amounts of happiness and distress. Now, I know for many of you, this is a novel concept, that when your body takes birth, it's packaged with the appropriate amount of happiness and distress that you are awarded. How? Based on your past life activities. So time is not simply going tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Time is delivering your karmic package. Time is like a courier system that's delivering your karmic package of happiness and distress. But the true yogi sees the equality despite the varying bodies and despite the varying amounts of material happiness and distress. This is a totally different vision, I know. That doesn't mean that you just ignore someone's distress, because after all, you're a non-material self, you're spiritual. Whatever suffering comes your way is just your external karma. No, the genuine yogi understands through knowledge as well as experience that the suffering people are undergoing, although external to them, still has to be dealt with. I don't know if you've ever been in the room, shared a room at night with someone who's having a nightmare. They're tossing and turning, even moaning and crying out. So what do you say? You're awake and you're watching all this. Do you say, oh, no need for me to care, the person's just having a nightmare? You wouldn't do that. You would wake the person up, spare the person some suffering. You'd intervene, even though it's just a dream. So similarly, the bhakti yogi understands the temporariness of the material situation, but still he or she is deeply touched and concerned by the material suffering of others. We don't use spiritual knowledge as an excuse to avoid focusing on the suffering of others. So then we come to the point of what is the actual solution to human suffering? How can we establish justice properly? If you're having a nightmare and I wake you up, I'll stop that suffering of that particular nightmare. But have I actually awakened you completely? Or have I simply changed you from the night dream to the daydream? You see, at night, you forget all about your day body, right? You're doing so many things in your dream body. You forget all about the body that's sleeping in the bed. When you wake up, the yoga texts want to know, do you really wake up, or do you just change from the night dream to the daydream? I am this body. Here is my external identity. I have so many activities for today, all based on some external temporary identity that I have. In other words, I've just changed dreams. So the Bhakti Yoga program is two-pronged. Wake you up from the nightmare, number one. It's common human decency, common human compassion. But number two is deeper. We don't want to wake you up simply to another dream, the daydream. We want you to wake up completely. Now, Krishna explains in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita that what is night for the materialist is day for the transcendentalist, the yogi or meditator that is free from illusion or trying to become free from illusion. They have two different perceptions, two different visions. So what is night for one is day for the other, and vice versa. The materialist is always asleep during the daytime of spiritual activities. And the genuinely spiritual person is always asleep to the day of materialistic activities. But that doesn't mean the yogi is living in la la land and can't function in the material world. No, being asleep to the daytime of materialistic activities means you're not living your lifestyle in your waking hours for the purpose of just temporary enjoyment, temporary exploitation, temporary power grabs. You have a different focus. You know how to deal with the world in the best way. So I was telling you this story, what happened to me during my days at Yale. Like every student, I was part of a student organization. So this particular student organization was organizing a weekend in which they would invite students from neighboring elitist schools, of course, and especially girls from neighboring elitist schools, because at that time Yale was all men. So I was very politically concerned. My goal in studying was to find a solution for all the world's problems. I had my academic advisor's permission to do that. So I was serious about social justice, uplifting humanity. I went to an organizational meeting for this special weekend in which students from other Ivy League schools would attend, and especially the young ladies from Radcliffe and Vassar and Barnard and Sarah Lawrence. So the weekend organizers for this event, at a meeting, maybe 100 students attended. They presented the program. There'll be workshops, seminars. There'll be walks through the unfortunate parts of the city of New Haven, just so we can see with our own eyes. So after they presented the whole schedule, then the vice chairman stood up and said, "All right, boys, you've heard the schedule for the coming weekend. After all the day's events are over, workshops, seminars, community walk, etc., you know what time it is, boys." And everyone just yelled out, "Party!" I said, "Wait a minute," I said to myself, aren't we supposed to be serious here? Aren't we? Isn't our goal to uplift humanity and make political and economic change? But everyone was roaring with delight. "Party, party!" It gets worse. And then he said, "Now, if 4 a.m. comes around, 4 a.m., it's party night, and the clock reaches 4 a.m., and you have failed, you have not scored, you have not made it to a motel room with one of the visiting girls, then be humble. Just come on back and help clean up the party room." I said, "Oh," I said, "I'm out of here." It's the same old. This exploitation, one way or the other. the yoga text will explain to us that if we actually want to bring about change, then it's true what Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in others. At that time, I had no idea how to transform consciousness and be the change that could inspire others to go to a higher level. I did come to the conclusion that there's no material solution. Upon graduation, that was my conclusion. So we want to be happy. Obviously, the students who were all for the party, they felt, look, we've spent all day discussing how to uplift others. Now it's our time. What's wrong with a bit of recreation, you know? So although I didn't know it, I was actually trying to get to a deeper understanding of what is the human purpose and how should a human being function in this world. Let me give you a quotation which I've thought about for many years. It's from a German Jewish philosopher, Theodor Adorno. He famously proclaimed, there is no right life in the wrong one. In the wrong life, there's no right life. So usually this is taken to mean that no matter how much you do an ethical shift in your own individual lifestyle, because you're embedded within a system, a political and economic structure of society that imposes social problems, you actually can't be right individually because you're living within the wrong. Think about that. I've battled with this thought for many decades. No matter how you bring about an ethical shift in yourself, social justice, aware of so many exploitations, unless you change the structure that encases you, your impact is inconsequential. I've thought about that, and my studies and practice of the Bhakti Yoga texts have shown that this statement is true on the material plane, but on the spiritual plane, something else is possible. Other opportunities develop. If you can become spiritually transformative for yourself, and if you can then inspire someone else, just one person, to go to a higher level, go to the non-material level, you have actually made a lasting difference. In other words, you may enact so many changes in terms of the trance, the mass consensual trance that we can say society is. You can change the variations within the trance, within the matrix, so to speak. But can you get at least one person out? Because that one person can do so much on another level. So it's not about numbers, it's about quality. But let's drop back to our trying to be right while being embedded in wrong. We pay pay so much attention, we put so much emphasis on our social roles, whether you want to admit it or not. We're acting according to social roles, which are predetermined. And actually, if we're honest, we'll see that we have very little control over the content of our lives in an original way. But we do get a choice of character mask. But you'll say, wait a minute now. I've got control over my life, the content of my life. I've chosen to study this. I've chosen to purchase that. I've chosen this kind of clothes to wear, this car to drive, within my means, of course, but still I've chosen. But is that really important? Is that really an indicator of important choice? So just think about it. I'm saying these things to provoke you, I admit. Get you thinking outside the box, which I know many of you already do. How much am I acting within predetermined social roles? And I really don't have much influence over the content of my life, except, and here it comes, except for a choice of character mask. What kind of mask do I wear in the drama? That's what we call choice and freedom. I've chosen this mask. You've chosen that mask. Hey, why not get rid of the masks? But that is not an option. So things get worse. The real movers and shakers in society. Is it you? Is it me? Actually, even speaking conventionally, that means referring to our material identity. Whatever we perceive our gender to be, whatever we perceive our ethnicity to be, our age group. Think of ourselves in that way. Are we, in terms of our social designations, the real movers and shakers in this society, the consumer societies that we live in, or are commodities, things, the real movers and shakers? Things, commodities that have a song and dance of their own on the market. And you must closely pay attention. Otherwise, the fear is there. We'll starve, we'll become homeless, we'll die. Our fate is bound up in the song and dance of commodities. Natural resources that have been exploited. Financial instruments, financial commodities. Those are the real prime movers. But here, in our false ego, we're thinking, I am doing so much, when actually so much is being done to us. So the bhakti yogi has a dilemma. How can I truly be an individual? And how can I be a caring individual? If you consider Jesus Christ to be a yogi, as I do, a perfect yogi, he said something very interesting, according to the Bible. He said, you have to be in the world, but not of the world. This is quite mystical. the bhakti yogis can understand Jesus Christ as a topmost mystic yogi in bhakti. He said things that people are still trying to apply today, even though they're stated quite simply. Be in the world, but not of the world. As I often explain, and some of you have heard me explain it before, this is like someone telling you to submerge yourself in water fully, but don't get wet. How do you do that? So bhakti yoga is the art, science, and culture of how to be in the world, but not of the world. Then you can actually affect real justice at the deepest level. Now, we're not criticizing any activity for reducing inequality, injustice, brutality. Certainly not. What I'm saying is that we need a balanced approach. We need to deal with what is external and also deal with what is internal. You've all heard the expression Band-Aid solution. It's said with a negative connotation. Something monumental or massive crisis is affecting you, and someone says, all you need to do is this. And you say, wait a minute. That's not going to really get to the root of my problem. So the phrase Band-Aid solution means that it's superficial. But I was just explaining to one of my fellow bhakti yogis who lives in Florida, and he had a meeting tonight with the chief of police in his city. The chief of police was concerned. What am I going to do? I don't want my people in my police department to be perpetuating atrocities. I've got to think ahead. I've got to do something. So this bhakti yogi from the city in Florida asked me for advice. And I said, Band-Aid solutions have value. Because usually you might expect spiritual people, especially yogis and meditators, to say, well, it's just the world of illusion. It's just all body stuff, which it is. But nevertheless, Band-Aid solutions have value. And we should be expert at that. If I have a headache and you give me an aspirin, even though the aspirin will cure the headache, do I say, oh, it's just a temporary solution? No, if I got a splitting headache and you offer me an aspirin, I'll take it. And I'll be grateful. But what if I keep getting the headache again and again and again? What are you going to tell me? You will tell me, hey, you need to go see a doctor and get to the root of this problem. Would I argue with you? Wait, I'll just take the aspirin. I'll keep taking 20 aspirins a day. What's the problem? Destroy the lining of my stomach. You say, no, you're having repeated headaches. There is some kind of structural problem, systemic problem. Another way of looking at it, is the difference between naturopathy, holistic healing, and conventional medicine. Stated very simply, conventional medicine is known for expertise in dealing with immediate symptoms. You got a headache, take an aspirin. Whereas naturopathy, alternative healing, proposes to give you a whole system solution. If you've got repeated headaches and you go to a natural healer, what's he or she going to say to you? Number one, what's your diet? Number two, do you exercise? Number three, do you get enough sleep? Number four, do you have a very stressful job or a very stressful relationship? True, conventional doctors are starting to ask these kind of questions. But conventional medicine is not known for that in particular. Just let's deal with the symptoms. So my point is, we need both. We need to deal with the symptoms and we need to deal with the root. We don't want to minimize treating the symptoms. You got a splitting headache? If I got an aspirin, I'll give it to you. But if you keep getting headaches, then I'm going to help you to get to the root of the problem. So that is what bhakti yoga does. The root of the problem is that we are non-material beings identifying as the temporary body and mind, and then we exploit others based on this false identity. I'll give you the sequence that the Bhakti Yoga text describe. Step number one in Sanskrit is avidya, ignorance. I don't have the knowledge of what I am or why I'm in this world. I'm born and I die, and I just consider that before I was born, there was non-existence. After I die, there'll be non-existence. So my short life is like a speck in the ocean of non-existence. That's all I know. And so therefore, I'm going to try to have as good a time as I can before the lights go out. So this is avidya, ignorance. I have no understanding of my non-material self and my non-material purpose in life. So that's just step one now. After avidya, ignorance, comes moha, illusion. I am this body. I am this mind. And then all kinds of illusory activities take place based on that moha, that illusion of false identity. Okay, avidya, ignorance, moha, illusion. What comes next? Mahamoha, super illusion. What is that super illusion? Not only am I the body, but I'm related to so many other bodies that are like my body. And yes, my friends are all those who have bodies like me, and my enemies are all those who have bodies looking different from mine. This is Mahamoha. You become embedded in a network of false identities rather than just being a single solitary false identity. You band together with other illusioned beings and basically just screw the world up. So avidya, moha, mahamoha, and then tamishra. Because material desires must be frustrated, you become angry. And you take that anger out on others. The yoga texts, the bhakti yoga texts especially, will tell you that material desires cannot be fulfilled. Therefore, you must become angry. And then finally comes andatamisra, destructive activities in mass, destroying the environment, destroying other people, destroying other species, destroying your own relationships, and even destroying your own self. So what's going to get to the root of all this problematic complexity? This is what the bhakti yogi is concerned with. Superficial solutions do have value. We need a balanced program of dealing with the symptoms, dealing with the external causes, and getting to the root. Then we can have a complete social justice package. So we're not doing what sometimes is referred to as spiritual bypassism. Because I'm spiritual, I just bypass all these pressing social problems. We're not doing that. In fact, by understanding the spiritual vision, you can be more effective with the external problems. So finally, there's this point that often there's a misconception that if I become universal in my understanding of suffering, not simply understanding human suffering, but all species of life. If I do that, I'll lose my focus or my focus on a specific injustice, like genderism, racism, police brutality. If I focus on the big picture, I'll dilute my concentration on the immediate injustice at hand. That can be true, I'll admit, if someone is just theoretically on the universal platform. Just lip service. Yeah, we're all in one family, all human beings. Yeah, all Earth's creatures. And meanwhile, your lifestyle is one of exploitation, and the way you treat others is one of brutality or facilitating brutality or turning a blind eye to it. That's not my problem. So this misunderstanding, it can be there, that if I become universal, because as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, all living entities are related as coming from the same ultimate source. So that means a bhakti yogi is concerned with the suffering of all human beings and all species of life. But that has to be realized. It can't be just artificially imitated. Because if it's artificially imitated, then it becomes an excuse not to deal with what's right in front of you. So again, this fear that if I become universal, I will dilute my focus on immediate situations of injustice. No, if you're genuinely universal, if your universalism is based on spiritual knowledge and experience, you'll be able to better focus on specific situations. You'll see those specific situations more acutely. How can this happen? I know suffering is all over the world, but look at this instance right before me. How can we allow that to happen? So I'm saying then that the bhakti yogi is the most compassionate and most effective person And it's not that the Bhakti Yogi's universal vision causes a dilution in his or her response to a particular incident of injustice, oppression, exploitation. So please think about that. How to see the big picture and see the small local picture and be effective on all levels so that we can benefit all living entities. And if we can't properly see what's happening right in front of our eyes, what is the use of talk about universalism? It's artificial. But the goal of Krishna's teachings in Bhagavad Gita is to indeed bring us genuinely to the universal platform. And those kind of persons are the greatest welfare workers, the most beneficial. All right. We've got into some deep stuff tonight. Any questions?
Before we get into before we get into questions, can we just make a few announcements real quick? First of all, thank you so much for the enlightening and inspiring talk. And just a few announcements real quick. First of all, if you guys liked the talk and felt inspired, stay in touch with Devamrita Swami's wisdom in book form. One of them is Hiding in Unnatural Happiness. And we'll talk about what is true and natural happiness and how we're trying to look for happiness in the wrong places right now. And the other one is Searching for Vedic India. It's a history of ancient civilizations in India and the scientific and technological advancements they had. And thanks to the graduate students committee at Caltech, we actually are able to get 15 free books. And yes, please feel free to message us or email us. I'll send you the email and chat. Preference will be given to Caltech grad students and Caltech postdocs and undergrads. But even if you're not affiliated, still message us, and we'll try to make reasonable accommodations for the books. And I will send the email out right now. And thank you so much. And definitely, we can give the floor for questions right now.
Just unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Gwen has a question.
I do. Hi, how are you? Okay, I have a lot going through my head right now. I'm going to try to focus. Okay, toward the beginning of the conversation, you talked about karma has each of us being born with a particular amount of happiness and distress.
Yes.
And my understanding is that when we're born, that in human form, in this lifetime is when we have the ability to exercise free will and actually shift karma in this lifetime and for potentially a future lifetime. This is a two-part question.
One part, because it's, you're asking things that are very weighty. So have mercy, one part at a time. Mm-hmm. So your first part is that does the human being have the power to shift karma? Is that right?
Yes. Yeah, when you're born in human form, in this lifetime, that is when you have the opportunity to shift your karma through free will, through yoga. Yoga is a path to alleviate suffering.
Yoga literally means to link, to connect. Right. So we must connect with that ultimate source. And then through that connection to the supreme whole, we can have our karma dealt with. Otherwise, we're very tiny. And on our own, it's not possible to deal with lifetimes of karma. Just like you've never been in prison, neither have I, but if you're in prison, you have the free will to decide, shall I sleep on my right side or my left side? But if you want to get out of prison, you're at the mercy of higher authorities. You're under the control of higher authorities. So we have a little leeway, a little wiggle room, but in terms of dealing with our burden of karma, we need to connect with that ultimate source, that ultimate controller. Krishna is also known as Yogeshvara, the master of, or the controller of the yoga system. Another name for Krishna is Yogeshvareshvara, the controller of the controllers of the yoga system. So we don't have the potency to get out of prison on our own. We can make some adjustments, no doubt. And those adjustments will make our life better. But if you want to get out of the matrix, so to speak, if you want to get out of illusion completely, then you've got to connect with that ultimate controller. So that is what bhakti brings you to. At the end of Bhagavad Gita, you may have read, Krishna says, just shut down your plan-making factory, take my plan, and I'll handle the karma. You don't worry. That's the grand offer at the end of Bhagavad Gita, the song of the supremely opulent one. Okay, number 2.
Okay, with respect to how that plays into social justice, and I'm going to be very specific with the social justice issues, the very current ones. And I'm white. I'm going to call it the white black, because with George Floyd. So you have one group of people, like I've had privilege simply by virtue of having been born with white skin. I recognize it. And because I walk around in white skin in a country that was built for people and designed for people with white skin, I've had privileges. My relatives have, as they've bought houses, etc. So karma plays into that, but how is it that one group of people gets that karma and then another group of people that happen to have been born with a different color of skin gets a different karma, like a whole group of people? And obviously I've been dealt other karmas of distress and trauma, and but like to have a skin color be a karma, I got a little hung up on that.
This is the nature of moha, illusion, which concentrates into mahamoha, structural illusion. So the first mistake is to think, I am this body. And then the next mistake is to live one's life based on that illusion, which then multiplies into exploitative treatment of others based on this false identity of the body. So as I said, we want to have a two-pronged approach. We want to deal with the external causes as well as the underlying root. So if someone is exploiting you, I won't say, oh, it's all external, you're not the body. I will say, this is a horrible injustice, we must do something about it. And at the same time, I'll think, what's going on in the consciousness of persons who do this? What's going on in the mindset of society? How do we purify and cleanse the whole problem? Now you may say, well, that solution probably will never be successful. How are you going to solve the whole problem? But acting for truth is always the best thing to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
So I appreciate your humility and honesty. Yes, although many have forgotten in the USA, they live in a country that's founded on genocide and slavery. So much of the economic engine is based on that. And it's not just ancient history. So I appreciate your sensitivity and concern. And I hope that that sensitivity leads you to trying to be compassionate at the deepest level with the greatest or most comprehensive knowledge so you can be effective in relieving the suffering of all living entities. And certainly that doesn't mean lifting your eyes from what's right in front of you.
It's part of my life's work.
Yes.
Thank you.
Very wonderful question. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, is that Stephen?
Yes. Hey, I have a question about bringing these teachings into, like you said, a solution or a business. What does a bhakti business look like?
Business means make money, right?
It could, yeah.
Oh, what are you doing in business? If it's not for making money, you're doing some kind of nonprofit charity work. But business means making money. Like one American president earlier in the 20th century said, "The business of America is business." So
maybe I can be more specific.
Okay.
What is the
But you didn't let me finish though. Otherwise,
okay,
I sound, if you cut me off at this point, I sound like I'm simply representing Wall Street or something.
Sure.
Business is to make money, but the bhakti yogi knows that money is energy meant to be used for the highest purpose. Just like many people are using money for the lowest purpose, the bhakti yogi knows, I'm in a profit-making business. Let me use this for the greatest good, for the greatest upliftment of others. So make your business, but as Bhagavad Gita will teach you, what are you going to do with the results? It's called, in yoga terminology, the fruits. Phala. What are you going to do with the fruits of your endeavors? Are you going to gobble them up all yourself? Or are you going to distribute them so that everyone can benefit? And that distribution is voluntary.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
No.
Nugent, is that how you pronounce your name?
Yeah, Nugent. Yeah, so this whole quarantine stay-at-home thing was kind of like the beginning of a transformation of the ego being broken down. And we've undergone a shift where the unconscious aspects, or like the dark side of our personality, has begun to surface. And for example, like with the fear of coronavirus and the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of this has been revealed. So my question is, how can we bring more awareness to these aspects of ourselves so that we can get to the root cause of this problem and develop more resilience on both a collective and individual level? I know you mentioned spiritual vision and being removed from moha, the illusion. Could you expand on that?
Yes. What we're feeling during lockdown, because I'm in New Zealand now and it's unlockdown, it's just the borders are closed. But when there was the severe lockdown for 2 months or so, here in New Zealand, the Prime Minister said, we're going in early and we're going in hard. And so everything was curtailed for weeks. So what you could feel, and I know what you're talking about, is like a loss of autonomy and a loss of independence, and you just can't do what you want to do, and that's threatening.
Sure is.
You start climbing the walls after a while, like, hey, I got to get out and do my thing, whatever it is. That's what it's all about, living in a world of options. And I'm used to having power at my fingertips, respective to my socioeconomic status, of course. But I'm accustomed to having power. And now I'm locked down. This is freaking me out. So I understand the feeling, but you have an opportunity, and I see that you're noticing the things about me that are rising to the surface. I was too busy before to even take note. I see things I don't like. I see things that are uncontrollable. From the dark lagoon of my consciousness, stuff is floating up to the surface, and it looks hideous. This is a very good beginning. So I recommend that since you're fortunate to see all that happening, you take up the appropriate lifestyle for cleansing those impurities. You can't be victorious unless first you see the enemy, and you're getting a glimpse. So as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, no one can be a yogi who cannot control the mind and senses. So you're seeing that need. So I think that's very good. But now you take the next step. Use the lockdown to develop spiritual knowledge and start step by step transforming your lifestyle. I call it lifestyle engineering. So that you can transform your experience. So it's a good time to do some reading, good time to get into mantra meditation. It's a good time. You can use this lockdown as an opportunity to turn your life in a different direction. Normally, you wouldn't be able to do that, but now you have the chance to turn the 747 around, which is normally very difficult to do, but you can do that now with the right knowledge and the right practices of purification. So I recommend you get yourself a Bhagavad Gita, get into the Maha Mantra, and you will see the results.
Awesome. And then how about on an collective level? Like, is that more like if we do this on an individual level, we're going to be able to spread that, and it will be kind of able to scale? Or is it more like this is what is more individual specific?
No, you be a virus bearer. You be a super spreader,
Yeah.
a super spreader of high consciousness.
Yeah.
First, you become infected with higher consciousness, and then those who you come in contact with will notice. Not all of them, but according to their free will, they'll notice. Oh, what's happened to Nugent? He's really changed. And what's going on with you? What are you into? Some will be afraid. Hey, Nugent, hey, come on, where's the illusion? You know, what's happening?
Yeah.
Hey, you're trying to escape the matrix. Hey, man, wait a minute now. You're dangerous. But others will benefit. Like, can you tell me what you're into? I mean, you look more peaceful. You look more happy. What's going on, you know?
Yeah.
So become a super spreader. That's what I decided to do.
Well said. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, Nugent.
Hello, I have a question.
Yes, Brooke.
My question is, how do we know when we are too deep into solving the issue on the material level?
When you lose sight of who you are and what is the root cause of the whole situation.
Yeah.
So if you just, using the example I gave about headaches, if you just start taking day after day aspirin night and day to stop your headaches, you've lost sight of the fact that you've got an underlying problem that needs holistic attention. So do both, Brooke. Band-Aid solutions have value. But if you've got a cut on your arm and you put a Band-Aid there, who can criticize you? But if the wounds keep appearing all over your body and you just keep trying to put a Band-Aid here, a Band-Aid there, a Band-Aid there, this is not very effective.
Yeah.
So first, you be the change that you want to see in others. Pay that price, please. Because as I like to explain, the whole world is full of, well, not completely full, but there are many persons. I've been on every continent of the world, up and down for almost 50 years now. I see that there are people who want to help others, but they refuse to become qualified. They want to care, they want to love, but they refuse to become qualified to care and love. This is the challenge that Krishna makes in Bhagavad Gita. Real help, the deepest help, is on the non-material platform. So while you're doing the body solutions, which should be done, of course, simultaneously, you should offer help that gets to the root. Become qualified to do that, to transform consciousness. Otherwise, you look at the world situation today. Injustice on every level. We're living in an arena that's overwhelmed by 16,000 nuclear weapons. And that's a reduction, by the way. So we've got that on one side. On the other side, we've got climate change. And then down the middle comes roaring pandemic. The problem is that human beings don't understand what to do with their life. They're living with a distorted aim. And so the yoga texts say, particularly the bhakti yoga texts say, that nature is giving reactions to human beings because human beings are living in a misguided and destructive way. So nature is responding with all this. So please think about that. Become qualified to love, qualified to care. But who will take the trouble to do that? To realize how to materially care, how to care in a non-material way. So it's wonderful to be compassionate. Like I was so moved by Gwen's humble characterization of herself, that I'm a product of privilege. I could say the same thing about myself. Okay, I grew up in New York, and my family didn't have money for university, but I got a full scholarship and living expenses all paid to one of the most elitist institutions on the face of the earth. And so that's a privilege. But I thought, how can I use this privilege for the betterment of others? First of all, I don't want it to go to my head. And secondly, I want to use it to help others. So actually, I'll confess, and some of you have heard this before. My last month at Yale, I went to see my Dean of Studies, and I told him, I said, you know, frankly, I don't see a place for myself in materialistic society as it is today. He just looked me straight in the eye and said, you are a Yale man. You will influence the world. I don't think he meant like what I'm doing now, but I always remember those words. I wanted to really care and really love in a non-artificial way. I wanted to get to the root. And that takes time. That takes training. That takes knowledge. Just like if Brooke has a heart problem in one of her ventricles, not heart in terms of emotions, but heart in terms of, you know, physical organ. And I say, Brooke, I feel for you. I've heard the news. I'm a caring, loving person. I'll operate on you. What will Brooke say? What will you say, Brooke?
Thank you.
No. The first thing you'll ask is, what is my qualification? You don't let anyone come up to you and perform heart surgery on you. You want to know, have you been trained? What's your knowledge? Are you qualified? So similarly, I say the whole world is full of persons, many persons at least, who want to love and care, but they don't take the next step.
Yeah.
Which is to raise their consciousness so they can truly uplift others. Body upliftment is something. Hey, well, we all agree, Band-Aid solutions are something. But let's do those as well as go deeper at the same time. Great question.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Seth.
To play devil's advocate.
Don't be a devil, Seth. Don't be a devil.
It's a role. I was going to say that consumerism is a product of misguided human achievement, right? It's also the root of many large problems, like you mentioned, nature's reaction. But it's also the only way that the sheer number of people on Earth are supported in life. So there's a bit of a conflict there, and I'd like to know what you think about it.
Yes, because you have, as I said, a distorted aim of human society. That it's like you're addicted to something that's destroying you, but unless you go on feeding your addiction, you can't function. Bad news, isn't it? Just like I've heard from many persons in the USA that the reason why we have all these nuclear weapons is to protect our freedoms. But you see, spending billions, not billions, trillions of dollars on nuclear weaponry is enslavement. Instead of building up your healthcare system, like here in New Zealand, anyone gets universal health care. It's considered a right as a citizen. So that money has to come from somewhere. So if here's the fact. In our dearly beloved USA, there is a program for so-called making the nuclear arsenal safer. And it's going to cost $1.3 trillion. But actually, nuclear scientists in the know have pointed out that this so-called enhancement or making more safe is actually increasing the killing power by 2 times. But anyway, whether it increases the killing power or not, I mean, who cares about killing power? You know, people dying. Sure. That's a lot of money. But we think it's to protect our freedoms. But what am I free to do living under the threat of such nuclear mutual destruction? And I have to pay for it all. Who pays for all that stuff? So that's an example of how we're chained to solutions that are worse than the problem. And it's like a cycle we can't get out of. As you say, well, it's a consumer society that's enshackled people, but then again, how can they live without a consumer society? Where's their livelihood? This shows that we're suffering from a completely distorted human purpose. So you have hit the nail on the head.
Thank you.
We have a question from Betty to everybody. She said, what are we so afraid of? I'm not sure what the context of that is.
Actually, we're afraid of existence because we don't know what to do with it. So we try to blot out that fear with all kinds of temporary indulgences, intoxications, diversions, entertainment, because at the end of the day, at the end of the night, if we're left alone, we start thinking about our fear of existence. I don't know why I'm living, and I'm afraid of dying. That's what's rocking our boat at the core of our existence. We don't know what to do with ourselves. But when we're overloaded with social programming and we're wearing our character mask, I've chosen this character mask in the whole drama of a consumer society. And I've chosen these predetermined social roles. That's me. That suit, that dress, that's me. Then we can artificially overlook all these crucial concerns. But sooner or later, we have those moments, you know? Oh, I don't know what to do with myself. I don't know who I am. I'm scared. Oh, let me drink something, smoke something, grab onto someone. And that way, life goes on. Or you just bury yourself in money making. So this is why the Bhakti Yoga knowledge is so important. It gives us the strength and clarity of vision to actually face ourselves as non-material particles of the complete whole.
Thank you. And I think we have one more question by Natalie. She had a question before.
Okay.
Hi, Devamrita Swami.
Yes, Natalie.
This actually relates back to the same answer that you gave Brooke. At least I feel like it kind of does. So the question is it spiritual bypassing to decide to spread bhakti if we aren't ready?
If you aren't ready to do what?
To spread bhakti.
Well, you can do what's appropriate for your level. And I've seen many less than neophytes, complete beginners, actually touch someone else's consciousness in a way that's turned out to be major. So based on where you're at, you try to help. You may not be able to explain everything like I explain it. Come on, I've been at it for 48 years. But if you say, for example, come with me to the mantra house or come with me to the Caltech club. Hey, you that's an intervention of huge proportions. Okay, Natalie?
Thank you. Yes. Thanks.
I have a question.
Yes, Cynthia.
Yes. So how do you handle the sense of responsibility that rises when you see this injustice in others, without getting attached to the body identity and creating enemies out of other people? And in this case, the enemy being the aggressors of police brutality.
Yes. We cannot excuse exploitation and brutality. At the same time, we need to understand the uncontrolled mind that people have. And that uncontrolled mind is accompanied by enemies. Lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, and illusion. Those 6 enemies accompany the uncontrolled mind. And so therefore you can understand why someone would act in such a problematic way. You have to do something about the injustices, but you also want to understand what's going on in that person's mind. So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that for one who can control the mind is the best friend. And for one who has failed to do so, the mind is the worst enemy. So you're seeing uncontrolled minds, which are hiding behind a character mask, a predetermined social role. So understand the mentality of how someone could do these wrongs. And that'll help that we ourselves don't, in turn, do that to someone else.
Thank you.
One more thing, I guess.
Okay, Seth.
If you were to recommend one lifestyle change in this time of being alone, what would it be?
Get into the Maha Mantra meditation as a daily practice, and especially rise early in the morning and do it during the very peaceful and potent morning hours. Make an experiment. Try it. Contact one of our staff and they'll teach you how to do it if you don't already know, and make an experiment. I'm going to try this. I'm going to get into this. I've got nothing else to do right now and nothing to lose. Who knows? If I win big. So be adventurous, Seth. That's what I told. Yeah, that's what I told myself when I started. You know about those mantra beads? You've seen those or not yet? Okay. The mantra meditation, when you're serious about it, you do it on beads because that way you can count how many mantras. So I basically started in terms of minutes. I think I started with 30 seconds per morning. 30 seconds. And I said, that's enough, that's enough. But somehow or other, I rapidly increased. So you start somewhere and get into it. Take advantage of the situation you're in which you just can't run around like you used to do. But get into yourself. And when I say get into yourself, get into that mantra meditation. You know the mantra, right?
I've done it once before, but
I knew. I just didn't want to say. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. All right, Seth and everyone, I thank you all so much.
Thank you, Devamrita Swami, for the enlightening and inspiring class. And thank you so much, everyone, for the wonderful questions. And if anybody is interested in the books again by Devamrita Swami, I will send the email one last time through chat. And it's been such an enlightening night. And thank you so much, Devamrita Swami, for taking your time off in New Zealand to spend some time with Mantra House and the Caltech Club.
It's been a great pleasure. And I look forward to seeing you all again. I like this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We do too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.